Jack had always prided himself on being the kind of man who worked hard for his family. He wasn't flashy or particularly outgoing, but his loyalty and dedication to those he loved were unmatched. As a contractor, he spent long hours managing projects and ensuring deadlines were met, often sacrificing personal comfort for professional integrity. He'd built his life around providing for Sophia and creating a home where they could both thrive. Respect, trust, and honesty were the cornerstones of how he lived his life and how he believed relationships should work. Sophia, his wife of 6 years, was everything Jack wasn't. Outgoing, social, and full of charm. She could light up a room with her wit and infectious laugh, drawing people to her effortlessly. Their differences had once been a source of balance. Where Jack provided stability, Sophia brought spontaneity. But over time, Jack began to notice cracks in the foundation of their marriage. Sophia seemed distracted, distant, and her once bubbly nature now carried an edge of secrecy. Still, Jack brushed off his concerns, chalking them up to stress or the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. After all, Sophia had always been devoted, or so he thought. Ryan, on the other hand, was a man who thrived on chaos and the thrill of the forbidden. Arrogant and entitled, he took what he wanted without a second thought, thriving on the challenge of seduction and conquest. For Ryan, stealing another man's wife wasn't just an act of infidelity, it was a power play. When he met Sophia at a work function, her charm and vulnerability intrigued him. He pursued her relentlessly, feeding her fantasies of excitement and escape. He saw Jack as nothing more than an obstacle, a man he believed he could easily overpower, both emotionally and physically. The supporting characters played pivotal roles in Jack's story. Max, Jack's best friend since college, was a blunt, no-nonsense man who never hesitated to speak his mind. He had seen Jack through life's highs and lows and was fiercely protective of him. Max had always harbored suspicions about Sophia's loyalty, but he kept them to himself out of respect for Jack. When the truth came out, Max would be the first to have Jack's back, offering not just support but strategic advice. Ella, Sophia's younger sister, had always been wary of her siblings' decisions. She loved Sophia deeply but couldn't ignore the signs that something was amiss. Ella's protective instincts often put her at odds with Sophia, but when Jack confided in her about the affair, she didn't hesitate to take his side. Her loyalty to Jack was rooted in her respect for his character and her disappointment in Sophia's choices. Detective Carter, a sharp and meticulous investigator, entered the picture later, but his role was critical. Known for his ability to piece together even the most convoluted cases, Carter became involved when the fallout of Jack and Sophia's confrontation escalated beyond their personal lives. His sharp instincts and dedication to justice made him an invaluable ally to Jack in unraveling Ryan's darker schemes. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon. Jack's business trip had been cut short due to an unexpected project delay, leaving him with a rare opportunity to surprise Sophia. He imagined the joy on her face when he walked through the door unannounced, carrying her favorite coffee and ready to spend the evening together. The thought brought a smile to his face as he pulled into their quiet suburban neighborhood. As he approached the house, something felt off. There was a car parked down the street, one he didn't recognize. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to have visitors, but the sleek black sedan seemed out of place. Jack dismissed the thought, attributing it to his overactive imagination. But as he walked up the driveway, coffee cups in hand, a faint unease settled over him. Opening the front door, Jack was greeted by an unusual stillness. The house was quiet, too quiet. Sophia usually had music playing while she worked from home, or the faint hum of the television would echo from the living room. Today, there was nothing. Setting the coffee on the kitchen counter, Jack noticed another inconsistency. A distinct, unfamiliar scent in the air. It was cologne, musky and bold, a fragrance he didn't own. His pulse quickened as he moved through the house, his contractor's eye-catching details others might overlook. A pair of men's shoes sat neatly by the bed, expensive, polished, and definitely not his. His stomach churned as realization began to dawn. The bathroom door down the hall was ajar, steam billowing out into the hallway. The sound of running water stopped abruptly, followed by the shuffle of feet on tile. Jack stood frozen, his mind racing. He didn't want to believe what the evidence was telling him, but every detail screamed the truth he had been avoiding. As he moved toward the bedroom, the bathroom door opened, and Ryan stepped out. Barefoot and wrapped in a towel, Ryan froze when he saw Jack. For a moment, the two men stared at each other, the air thick with tension. Ryan, ever the arrogant opportunist, broke the silence first. "Look, man, it's not what it looks like." Jack's vision blurred with rage. The audacity of this man, this stranger, standing in his home, near his bed, and using his shower was almost too much to process. His hands clenched into fists as the weight of betrayal bore down on him. Ryan opened his mouth to say something else, but Jack didn't let him finish. In a blur of movement, Jack grabbed him by the towel and yanked him forward. "Not what it looks like?" Jack growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You've got 2 seconds to explain why you're in my house before I throw you out of it." Ryan stammered, his usual confidence evaporating. I didn't mean." But Jack had heard enough. With a burst of fury, he shoved Ryan backward, sending him stumbling into the closet. The flimsy door couldn't withstand the force, and it splintered as Ryan crashed through it headfirst. The impact was loud, echoing in the silent house, and Ryan groaned as he slumped to the floor. Sophia, drawn by the commotion, appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Jack!" she gasped, her voice trembling. "What are you doing?" "What am I doing?" Jack shot back, his voice shaking with anger. "What the hell are you doing, Sophia? Who is this guy? And why is he in my house?" Sophia's mouth opened and closed as she struggled to find the words. It's not what it looks like." Jack barked out a bitter laugh. "Funny, that's exactly what he said. Care to try again?" Ryan groaned from the floor, attempting to pick himself up, but Jack wasn't finished. He loomed over the man, his fists clenched. "Get out of my house," Jack snarled. "And if I ever see you again, you'll regret it." Ryan scrambled to his feet, clutching the towel around his waist as he bolted for the door. Sophia stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, but Jack didn't spare her a glance. He needed space, time to think, and most of all, a way to process the betrayal that had just shattered his world. As the front door slammed shut behind Ryan, Jack turned to Sophia, his eyes cold and unforgiving. "Start talking," he said, "and don't you dare lie to me." The storm had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The moment Ryan stumbled out of the house, clutching his towel and bruised ego, the air inside felt as heavy as a storm about to break. Jack stood by the door, his fists clenched at his sides, his breathing shallow as he watched Ryan disappear down the street. He could still hear the faint crash of the closet door, a reminder of the rage that had overtaken him just moments earlier. Turning back into the house, Jack faced Sophia, who stood trembling in the doorway of the bedroom. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with tears that hadn't yet fallen. "Jack," she whispered, her voice wavering, "I can explain." "Explain?" Jack said, his voice cold and sharp. "Explain what, Sophia? That I just walked into my own house and found another man in our shower? That there were 2 pairs of shoes by my bed? Go ahead. I'd love to hear your explanation." Sophia's lower lip quivered. "It was a mistake," she stammered. "I wasn't thinking straight. I didn't mean for it to happen." Jack's laugh was bitter, a sharp bark of disbelief. "A mistake? What part of this was a mistake? The part where you invited him into our home? Or the part where you thought I'd never find out?" Tears spilled down her cheeks now, but Jack's resolve was impenetrable. He'd spent years giving her the benefit of the doubt, ignoring the small red flags, trusting her implicitly. Now, every ounce of trust had been shattered, and he wasn't about to let her manipulate him into softening. "Jack, please," Sophia pleaded, stepping toward him. "I swear, it didn't mean anything. It's over. I'll end it, I promise." "Don't," Jack said, his voice low and firm. "Don't stand there and insult my intelligence. You didn't just trip and fall into an affair, Sophia. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice, a series of choices, and now you're caught." Her sobs grew louder, but Jack couldn't bear to be near her anymore. He grabbed his keys off the counter and turned toward the door. Where are you going? Sophia asked, panic rising in her voice. Away from you, Jack said without looking back. Don't call me. Don't text me. I need time to think, and right now, I can't even look at you. Before she could respond, Jack walked out, slamming the door behind him. He didn't know where he was going. He just needed to get out, to clear his head and escape the suffocating weight of betrayal that filled the house. Jack drove aimlessly for a while, the city lights blurring as he replayed the confrontation in his mind. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. How long had this been going on? How many times had Ryan been in his house, in his bed, while he was away working to provide for them? The questions swirled in his mind, each one stoking the fire of his rage. Eventually, Jack found himself in front of Max's house. Max, his best friend and confidant, was the only person Jack trusted to help him make sense of the chaos. He parked the car and knocked on the door, his hands trembling with a mixture of anger and exhaustion. Max opened the door, his face immediately registering concern. Jack? What's going on? I need a place to crash, Jack said simply, and a drink, a strong one. Max didn't ask questions right away. He led Jack inside, poured him a generous glass of whiskey, and waited until Jack was ready to talk. It didn't take long for the story to come pouring out. The shoes, the cologne, Ryan's audacity, and Sophia's pathetic attempts to justify her betrayal. By the time Jack finished, Max was pacing the room, his jaw clenched in anger. That son of a, Max muttered, cutting himself off. I knew something was off about her, Jack. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't have proof, but damn it, I knew. Jack nodded, his grip tightening around his glass. I need answers, Max. I need to know how long this has been going on and just how deep it goes. You'll get your answers, Max said firmly. We'll figure this out together. That guy messed with the wrong man. The next day, Max and Jack set to work. They started by combing through Sophia's social media profiles, looking for anything suspicious. Jack had never been one to snoop before, but now he realized how many red flags he'd missed. There were subtle hints, likes and comments from Ryan on her photos, cryptic captions that seemed to carry a hidden meaning, and posts about work events that didn't add up. Max, ever the resourceful one, suggested going through bank statements and receipts. If they've been sneaking around, they've left a trail, he said. Sure enough, they found transactions that raised questions. Charges at upscale restaurants Jack had never been to, hotel bookings that didn't match any trips he remembered Sophia taking, and suspiciously frequent stops at a boutique gym, one that Jack knew Ryan frequented. But the most damning evidence came from Sophia's phone. Jack had taken it with him when he left the house, unable to trust her with it anymore. At first, he hesitated to look through it, feeling a pang of guilt for invading her privacy. But the guilt quickly gave way to resolve. She had betrayed their marriage. He had every right to uncover the truth. What he found confirmed his worst fears. Text messages between Sophia and Ryan painted a clear picture of their affair, complete with flirtatious exchanges, plans to meet up, and even photos that made Jack's stomach churn. The affair hadn't been a fleeting mistake. It had been going on for months, carefully planned and executed. Still reeling from the discoveries, Jack decided to confide in Ella, Sophia's younger sister. Ella had always been perceptive, and Jack knew she cared about him deeply. When he showed up at her apartment, she welcomed him in with open arms, her concern evident. Jack, she said softly, what's going on? You look like you haven't slept. I haven't, Jack admitted. I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest with me. He laid everything out for her, sparing no detail. Ella's face shifted from shock to anger as the story unfolded. I knew it, she said through clenched teeth. I knew something wasn't right. Sophia's been distant lately, and she's been lying to me about where she's been. I should have said something. This isn't your fault, Jack said, but I need your help. I need to know if there's more to this than what I've found. Ella agreed immediately, determined to get to the bottom of her sister's betrayal. She shared her own suspicions and promised to dig deeper, using her connection with Sophia to uncover anything Jack might have missed. As Jack left Ella's apartment that evening, he felt a small flicker of hope. He wasn't alone in this fight. With Max and Ella by his side, He was ready to uncover the full truth and make sure neither Sophia nor Ryan got away with what they'd done. The investigation had begun, and Jack was prepared for whatever came next. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, Jack found himself grappling with a horrifying realization. Ryan wasn't just an opportunistic cheater, he was a predator. This wasn't a one-off affair born out of impulse. Ryan had a pattern, a history of targeting vulnerable women in seemingly stable relationships, leaving chaos and heartbreak in his wake. Jack first uncovered Ryan's true nature through Ella. During one of their late-night conversations, she shared a story that sent chills down Jack's spine. Ryan's name sounded familiar, Ella admitted. I couldn't place it at first, but then I remembered. He dated a friend of mine, Claire, a few years ago. It didn't end well. Ella explained how Claire, once a vibrant and successful entrepreneur, had been left in ruins after her relationship with Ryan. He swept her off her feet, Ella said bitterly. At first, it seemed like a fairy tale. He was attentive, charming, and knew exactly what to say. But over time, he started isolating her, making her question her worth. He borrowed money he never repaid, convinced her to change her business strategies to suit his advice. And when she finally stood up to him, he vanished. She lost her savings, her business struggled, and it took years for her to recover. This revelation fueled Jack's determination to expose Ryan for who he truly was. If Ryan had left a trail of devastation before, there was no telling how many other lives he had disrupted. With Max's help, Jack began digging deeper into Ryan's past. They scoured social media, court records, and online forums, uncovering hints of similar stories from other women who had crossed paths with Ryan. Each new discovery painted a clearer picture of a man who thrived on manipulation and destruction. One of those women was Melissa, a former victim who had posted anonymously on a relationship advice forum about her experience with Ryan. Max tracked her down, and after some convincing, Melissa agreed to speak with Jack. Her story was eerily similar to Claire's. Ryan had charmed his way into her life, gained her trust, and then exploited her emotionally and financially. He's a narcissist, Melissa said during their meeting. He doesn't see people as people. He sees them as tools, stepping stones to whatever he wants. He used me, and when I couldn't give him anything more, he discarded me like trash. Melissa provided Jack with a trove of evidence, text messages, emails, and even photos that proved Ryan's manipulative tactics. It was damning and undeniable. Armed with this information, Jack knew he had enough to not only confront Sophia again, but also to expose Ryan's toxic behavior to the world. With each new piece of evidence, Jack's anger and resolve deepened. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about how far Sophia had gone to protect her lies and the lengths Ryan had taken to infiltrate Jack's life. Jack decided it was time to confront Sophia with everything he had discovered. One evening, Jack returned to the house with a folder full of evidence. Sophia was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone, her demeanor tense and distracted. She barely looked up when Jack walked in, but when she saw the expression on his face and the folder in his hand, her body stiffened. "We need to talk," Jack said, his voice calm but resolute. Sophia hesitated, then set her phone down. "About what?" Jack placed the folder on the coffee table and flipped it open, revealing the damning evidence he had collected. Receipts, text messages, social media screenshots, and Melissa's testimony stared back at Sophia, their implications impossible to deny. Her face turned ashen as she scanned the contents. "What is this?" she asked weakly. "This," Jack said, his voice steady, "is everything I've learned about Ryan. He's not just some guy you fell for, Sophia. He's a predator. A serial cheater who preys on women like you, destroys their lives, and moves on to the next victim." Sophia's hands trembled as she picked up one of the printed messages, her eyes scanning the words. I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know he was like this." "But you knew you were lying to me," Jack shot back. "You knew you were sneaking around behind my back, bringing him into our home, into my bed. Don't pretend you're a victim here, Sophia. You made a choice, and now you have to own it." Sophia broke down, tears streaming down her face. "I was lonely, Jack," she sobbed. "I felt neglected. You were always working, always focused on everything but me. And then Ryan came along, and he made me feel wanted. Jack's jaw tightened. Don't you dare blame this on me. I was working to provide for us, to build a life for us. If you were unhappy, you could have talked to me. But instead, you chose to betray me. And now, you're trying to justify it? I made a mistake, Sophia pleaded. I see that now. Please, Jack, let's fix this. I'll cut him off. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't give up on us. But Jack had heard enough. Her tears and excuses, once a source of guilt and hesitation for him, now felt hollow and manipulative. He saw through her attempts to salvage the situation, recognizing them as the desperate ploys of someone who realized they were losing control. No, Sophia, Jack said firmly. This isn't something we can fix. You've broken my trust, and there's no coming back from that. Jack began preparing for divorce the very next day. He met with a lawyer, ensuring that Sophia's infidelity was documented and that he was protected from any financial fallout. His priority was safeguarding his assets and ensuring that he came out of the divorce with his dignity intact. Sophia, realizing the gravity of the situation, became increasingly erratic. She alternated between begging for forgiveness and lashing out in anger, accusing Jack of being cold and unfeeling. Her behavior only solidified Jack's resolve. She wasn't remorseful. She was desperate to maintain the comfortable life she had taken for granted. Jack, however, refused to let her manipulate him any longer. He remained calm and focused, refusing to be drawn into her emotional outbursts. With the support of Max, Ella, and his lawyer, he continued gathering evidence and building his case. The final straw came when Sophia tried to contact Ryan, despite her promises to cut him off. Jack intercepted the message, a pathetic attempt to rekindle their connection and convince Ryan to wait for her. It was the proof Jack needed to confirm that Sophia's remorse was nothing more than a facade. He confronted her one last time, presenting the intercepted message. "This is who you are, Sophia," he said, his voice steady but filled with quiet disappointment. "Even now, after everything, you're still lying. You're still trying to keep this going. I'm done." Sophia's tears and apologies fell on deaf ears. Jack had made his decision, and nothing she said could change his mind. The divorce was no longer just a possibility, it was an inevitability. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Jack felt a sense of clarity and control. He wasn't just ending his marriage, he was reclaiming his life. And he was determined to ensure that neither Sophia nor Ryan would ever have the power to hurt him again. The storm was far from over, but Jack was ready to face it head-on. Ryan's ego had been bruised beyond repair after being humiliated in Jack's home, and his simmering rage soon boiled over into retaliation. It started subtly, text messages filled with veiled threats and taunts. "You think you've won, but you haven't seen the last of me. Asterisk. Enjoy your victory while it lasts, because I'm not going anywhere." Asterisk. Jack's first instinct was to ignore the messages, refusing to give Ryan the satisfaction of a response. But as the texts grew more aggressive, Jack knew he couldn't dismiss them. He began documenting everything, saving screenshots and backing up his phone. If Ryan wanted to play dirty, Jack would make sure he had the upper hand. The harassment escalated quickly. One morning, Jack found his car vandalized, keyed from front to back, with slashed tires and a crude message scrawled across the hood. Asterisk, stay in your lane. Asterisk. Jack stood there in the driveway, his jaw clenched as he took in the damage. This wasn't just petty retaliation. It was a calculated attempt to intimidate him. Jack called Max as he filed a police report, recounting the latest act of vandalism. "This guy's unhinged," Jack said, his voice tight with frustration. "He's not just trying to scare me. He wants me to back down." Max's response was immediate. "Then we push back harder. Document everything, Jack. Every message, every incident. And if he escalates again, we'll make sure the law catches up to him." As if the vandalism wasn't enough, Ryan began spreading malicious rumors about Jack. He reached out to Jack's colleagues and friends, painting a distorted picture of the events that had unfolded. "Jack's just bitter because his wife chose someone better," Ryan sneered in one message to a mutual acquaintance. "He's trying to ruin my life because he can't handle the truth." Though most of Jack's close friends saw through the lies, The rumors created an undercurrent of tension in his professional and social circles. Jack could feel the whispers, the subtle shifts in how people interacted with him. It was infuriating, but he refused to let Ryan's games break him. Jack realized that ignoring Ryan wouldn't make him stop. If anything, Ryan's behavior was escalating precisely because he believed he could intimidate Jack into submission. It was time to take action. With Max's help, Jack began assembling a case against Ryan. He compiled all the text messages, the police report from the vandalism, and statements from anyone who had witnessed Ryan's harassment. Ella contributed as well, providing evidence of Ryan's past behavior and even contacting Claire, the friend who had been targeted by Ryan years earlier. Claire, still harboring resentment toward Ryan, agreed to provide a statement detailing her experience with him. Jack also enlisted the help of Detective Carter, a seasoned investigator who had a reputation for leaving no stone unturned. Carter quickly saw the pattern in Ryan's behavior and began digging into his past. What he uncovered was more incriminating than Jack had anticipated. Ryan's charm and confidence had masked a long history of deceit and criminal activity. Carter's investigation revealed that Ryan had been involved in several fraudulent schemes, including embezzling funds from a former employer and using fake identities to open credit lines in other people's names. There were even whispers of blackmail, with Carter uncovering emails suggesting that Ryan had threatened to release private photos of a former lover if she didn't comply with his demands. "These are serious offenses," Carter told Jack during one of their meetings. "If we can get enough evidence, we're not just looking at a restraining order, we're looking at potential jail time." Armed with Carter's findings, Jack filed for a restraining order against Ryan. The process was grueling, requiring detailed statements and court appearances, but Jack remained steadfast. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting to expose the truth about Ryan and protect anyone else from falling victim to his manipulative games. As the legal wheels began to turn, Ryan's confidence started to crack. The restraining order meant he could no longer contact Jack directly, and his attempts to intimidate from the shadows grew more desperate. He hired a lawyer, but his mounting legal troubles left him scrambling to cover his tracks. One of the turning points came when Carter uncovered evidence of Ryan's blackmail attempts. The emails were explicit, detailing how Ryan had leveraged private information against multiple women to extort money and favors. When confronted with this evidence, Ryan's lawyer tried to negotiate a deal, but Carter wasn't interested in letting him off lightly. Meanwhile, Jack's case against Ryan gained momentum as more witnesses came forward. Melissa, Claire, and even one of Ryan's former colleagues testified about his manipulative and predatory behavior. Each story painted a damning portrait of a man who had spent years exploiting others for his gain. The culmination of Jack's strategic moves came during a court hearing for the restraining order. Ryan, visibly agitated and far less confident than usual, sat across the courtroom as Jack presented his case. With Carter's evidence and the testimonies of Ryan's former victims, the judge had little sympathy for Ryan's pleas. "This isn't just about one act of harassment," the judge said, her tone stern. "This is a pattern of behavior that demonstrates a clear lack of respect for the law and for others. The restraining order is granted, and I strongly suggest you reconsider your actions moving forward." As Ryan left the courtroom, his face a mask of barely contained rage, Jack felt a sense of vindication. The legal system had finally caught up with Ryan, and though the restraining order was just the beginning, it was a decisive step in holding him accountable. The consequences of Ryan's actions rippled through every facet of his life. His reputation, already tarnished, was now in ruins. The evidence of his fraud and blackmail meant criminal charges were on the horizon, and his professional and social circles evaporated overnight. Even his closest allies distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with his toxic legacy. For Jack, the victory wasn't just about winning in court, it was about reclaiming his life. Ryan's attempts to intimidate and humiliate him had failed, and Jack emerged from the ordeal stronger and more determined than ever. As Jack sat with Max and Ella later that evening, reflecting on the journey they'd been through, he felt a rare sense of peace. "It's over," he said, raising a glass to toast with them. "The guy thought he could tear me down, but all he did was prove that I'm stronger than he'll ever be." Max grinned, clinking his glass against Jack's. "Here's to you, Jack. And here's to never letting another Ryan into your life again." Jack smiled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. The dangerous game Ryan had tried to play was over, and Jack had come out on top. Now, he could focus on what truly mattered, moving forward and building a future free from lies and betrayal. The fallout of Sophia's betrayal was swift and brutal. News of her affair spread like wildfire through their social circles, fueled by whispers and speculation. It didn't take long for the story to evolve from a private marital scandal into public gossip, with everyone weighing in on the drama. The leaked details of Ryan's behavior only added fuel to the fire, casting Sophia in an even worse light. She wasn't just a woman who had cheated on her husband. She was someone who had been manipulated by a known predator, and her complicity painted her in an unflattering light. Sophia found herself increasingly isolated. Friends who had once admired her charm and vivacity now avoided her, either out of loyalty to Jack or to distance themselves from the scandal. Invites to social events dried up, and she felt the sting of judgment whenever she entered a room. Even her colleagues, who had previously respected her, treated her with a mix of pity and disdain. One particularly humiliating encounter occurred at a charity event she had been a regular at for years. As she approached a group of acquaintances, their laughter died down, and an uncomfortable silence filled the air. One of them, unable to contain her frustration, muttered under her breath, "She has some nerve showing up here." Sophia, overhearing the comment, flushed with shame and left the event early, her confidence in tatters. Sophia tried to reach out to a few close friends, but her attempts at damage control fell flat. Her explanations and excuses only made things worse. "I was lonely," she would say. Jack was distant. "It just happened." But those who had known Jack for years saw through her justifications. They knew him as a devoted husband who had worked tirelessly to provide for his family. Sophia's claims of neglect sounded hollow, and sympathy was in short supply. Amid the crumbling of Sophia's social life, Jack delivered the final blow: divorce papers. He handed them to her himself, his expression calm but resolute. "Sophia," he began, his voice steady, "this marriage is over. I've tried to understand why you did what you did, but the truth is, there's no excuse for it. I deserve better, and I refuse to let your choices define my future." Sophia's hands trembled as she took the papers, her eyes scanning the terms. Jack had ensured she was left with minimal financial support, citing her infidelity as the reason for the divorce. The house, savings, and most assets would remain with Jack. Sophia would receive only what was legally required, and even that felt like a generous concession given the circumstances. "This isn't fair," Sophia said, her voice breaking. "I made a mistake, but you're punishing me like I'm some kind of monster." "No, Sophia," Jack replied, his tone cold. "I'm holding you accountable. You didn't just make a mistake. You lied, you betrayed me, and you brought chaos into my life. Actions have consequences, and this is yours." Sophia's tears fell freely as Jack turned and walked out, leaving her alone with the papers that symbolized the end of their marriage. Ella, who had been one of Jack's staunchest allies throughout the ordeal, couldn't stay silent any longer. She confronted Sophia at their mother's house, where Sophia had retreated after being served with the divorce papers. "What were you thinking?" Ella demanded, her voice sharp with anger. "How could you do this to Jack? To yourself?" Sophia, still reeling from the divorce papers, struggled to defend herself. "I don't know, Ella," she said, her voice choked with tears. "I wasn't happy. I felt invisible." "Invisible?" Ella shot back, her voice rising. "Jack adored you. He gave you everything, and you threw it away for a man like Ryan? Do you even realize what you've done?" Sophia's shoulders slumped, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said weakly. "I made a mistake." "No," Ella said firmly. "You made a series of choices. You lied, you cheated, and you hurt someone who didn't deserve it. And now you're facing the consequences." Ella's words hit Sophia harder than any of the public judgment she had faced. Coming from her sister, they carried a weight that was impossible to ignore. For the first time, Sophia was forced to truly confront the gravity of her actions, and it left her feeling hollow. While Sophia grappled with the wreckage of her personal life, Ryan's downfall was even more catastrophic. Detective Carter's investigation into Ryan's past had uncovered enough evidence to build a strong case against him. Charges of fraud, blackmail, and harassment piled up, painting a damning picture of a man who had spent years exploiting others for personal gain. Melissa and other victims came forward, their testimonies adding fuel to the fire. Each story painted a consistent pattern of manipulation, deceit, and emotional abuse. Carter worked tirelessly to ensure Ryan faced the full weight of the law, building a case so airtight that even Ryan's high-priced lawyer couldn't find a way out. When Ryan was arrested, the media quickly picked up the story. Headlines described him as a serial manipulator and a master of deceit, and his mugshot became the face of every news article. His professional reputation, already damaged, was now irreparably destroyed. Clients severed ties, colleagues distanced themselves, and any remaining allies abandoned him. In court, Ryan tried to feign remorse, but his arrogance seeped through. "This is all a misunderstanding," he insisted. But the evidence was too overwhelming for anyone to believe him. The judge handed down a harsh sentence, citing Ryan's repeated offenses and lack of accountability. Sophia watched Ryan's collapse from the sidelines, her feelings a complex mix of anger, regret, and despair. She had tied her fate to his, and now, as his world crumbled, hers did too. The man she had risked everything for had turned out to be nothing more than a con artist, and the realization left her feeling empty. Jack, meanwhile, found a sense of closure in Ryan's downfall. Knowing that Ryan was finally being held accountable for his actions gave Jack a sense of justice, not just for himself but for everyone Ryan had hurt. It was a small but meaningful victory in the larger journey of rebuilding his life. With her marriage over, her reputation in tatters, and Ryan out of the picture, Sophia was left to face the consequences of her actions alone. Her once vibrant social life was gone, and even her family struggled to look at her the same way. She moved into a small apartment, far removed from the comfortable home she had shared with Jack, and took a job that barely covered her expenses. Every day was a reminder of what she had lost, and for the first time, Sophia began to understand the full weight of her choices. She started attending therapy, desperate to find a way to make sense of her actions and rebuild her life. But the road to redemption was long, and there were no guarantees. As Sophia faced her reckoning, Jack focused on moving forward. The divorce, while painful, marked the beginning of a new chapter for him, one defined by freedom, self-respect, and the promise of a brighter future. For Jack, Sophia's downfall wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. And in that justice, he found peace. When the dust finally settled and the chaos of the past months began to fade, Jack found himself standing at a crossroads. His marriage was over, the betrayal laid bare for the world to see, and Ryan had faced the consequences of his actions. Yet, Jack knew that true redemption wouldn't come from external victories alone. It had to come from within. The first step in his journey was simple but profound: reclaiming himself. For years, Jack had poured every ounce of his energy into providing for Sophia and building their shared life. In doing so, he had slowly lost touch with the things that made him feel alive and whole. Now, free from the weight of a toxic relationship, Jack began to explore what happiness looked like on his own terms. Jack started with his passions. He had always loved woodworking, a skill passed down from his grandfather, but he hadn't touched his tools in years. His garage became his sanctuary, a space where he could focus on creating instead of reliving the pain of his past. The rhythmic sound of a saw cutting through wood, the feel of sandpaper smoothing rough edges, it was therapeutic. Jack's first project was a simple chair, but as he honed his craft, he began building intricate furniture pieces that reflected his newfound sense of purpose. Photography was another hobby Jack revisited. He dusted off his old camera and began capturing the world around him. Serene landscapes during morning hikes, candid moments in bustling parks, and even the quiet beauty of his own backyard. Each photo became a reminder that the world was full of light and color, even in the darkest times. Jack also took steps to prioritize his physical and mental health. He joined a local gym, finding solace in the discipline of weightlifting and cardio sessions. The physical exertion wasn't just about getting in shape. It was a way to release the lingering anger and frustration that still bubbled beneath the surface. Therapy became another cornerstone of Jack's healing process. At first, he had been hesitant to open up to a stranger about his deepest wounds, but his therapist's empathetic approach made it easier to share. Together, they unpacked the pain of Sophia's betrayal, examined the doubts and insecurities it had left behind, and worked on rebuilding Jack's self-worth. Max, ever the supportive friend, suggested Jack join a support group for people who had experienced infidelity. At first, Jack resisted. The idea of sitting in a circle and sharing his story with strangers felt uncomfortable. But Max, in his typical blunt fashion, pushed back. "You've carried this on your own for long enough," he said. "Sometimes, it helps to know you're not alone." Reluctantly, Jack attended his first meeting. He was surprised by how much he resonated with the stories of others. Each person in the group had faced their own version of betrayal, and their shared experiences created a sense of camaraderie that Jack hadn't realized he needed. Over time, he began sharing more of his own story, finding solace in the understanding and support of people who truly got it. As Jack healed and grew, his social circle also began to shift. Ella remained a steadfast ally, checking in regularly and encouraging Jack to embrace his new beginning. One day, during one of their coffee chats, Ella mentioned a friend of hers named Grace. "You'd like her," Ella said with a knowing smile. "She's smart, kind, and she's been through her own share of struggles. I think you two would get along." Jack hesitated. The idea of meeting someone new felt daunting. He wasn't sure if he was ready to open his heart again. But Ella was persistent, and eventually, Jack agreed to a casual introduction. "No pressure," Ella promised. "Just a conversation. If nothing else, you'll make a new friend." When Jack met Grace, he was struck by her warmth and authenticity. Unlike Sophia, who had always been the center of attention, Grace had a quiet strength that drew people in without demanding the spotlight. She listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and shared her own experiences with a refreshing honesty that Jack hadn't encountered in a long time. Their first meeting was over coffee at a quaint cafe, where they talked about everything from their favorite books to their thoughts on life's unexpected twists. Grace had been through a difficult divorce herself and understood the challenges of rebuilding after betrayal. Her empathy and wisdom resonated deeply with Jack, and he found himself looking forward to their next conversation. Jack and Grace's relationship developed gradually, with both of them taking the time to get to know each other on a deeper level. They bonded over shared values and similar outlooks on life, finding comfort in each other's company without rushing into anything. Grace appreciated Jack's honesty and the way he valued mutual respect, while Jack admired Grace's resilience and her ability to find joy in the little things. They spent weekends exploring local trails, sharing meals cooked together, and attending community events. Jack was careful to maintain the boundaries he had learned to set through therapy, ensuring that he didn't lose himself in the relationship. Grace respected his need for space and independence, and her patience made it easier for Jack to trust again. One evening, as they sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Jack turned to Grace and said, "I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again. You've reminded me that not all connections have to hurt." Grace smiled, placing her hand on his. "And you've reminded me that it's possible to rebuild, no matter how broken things seem." As Jack's relationship with Grace blossomed, he found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. The betrayal that had once consumed him now felt like a distant memory, a painful but necessary chapter in his story. It had taught him resilience, self-respect, and the importance of surrounding himself with people who truly valued him. He no longer viewed Sophia's betrayal as a reflection of his own worth. Instead, he saw it as a testament to her shortcomings and insecurities. The growth he had experienced since their divorce was proof that he was capable of overcoming even the deepest wounds. Jack also took pride in how he had handled Ryan's retaliation. By staying calm, seeking support, and taking strategic action, he had not only protected himself but also ensured that Ryan faced the consequences of his actions. The justice he had achieved, both legally and emotionally, was a testament to his strength and determination. Jack's redemption wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about reclaiming his future. Through healing, growth, and the support of people like Max, Ella, and Grace, He had rebuilt a life defined by honesty, respect, and love. For the first time in years, Jack felt truly at peace. As he stood in his workshop one evening, putting the finishing touches on a handcrafted dining table, Jack couldn't help but smile. The table, a gift for Grace, was more than just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of the life he was building, one step at a time. And as he looked ahead to the future, Jack knew that this new chapter was only the beginning. Ryan's descent into legal ruin was both inevitable and long overdue. After months of investigation and courtroom battles, the day of his sentencing finally arrived. The charges against him were extensive: fraud, blackmail, harassment, and violations of restraining orders. Each count painted a picture of a man who had spent years manipulating, exploiting, and deceiving others for his gain. With the overwhelming evidence Detective Carter had compiled and the testimonies from Melissa, Claire, and other victims, Ryan's conviction was a foregone conclusion. The courtroom was packed that day, a stark contrast to the life Ryan had tried to project, a life of dominance and control. Now, the people he had wronged stood united, ready to see justice served. Jack sat in the back row, his presence quiet but resolute. He wasn't there for revenge. He was there to witness the closure of a chapter that had caused so much turmoil. Ryan entered the courtroom looking disheveled, a shadow of the arrogant man he once was. His confidence had crumbled under the weight of his crimes, and the realization that his actions had caught up to him was evident in his hunched posture and sunken eyes. He avoided making eye contact with anyone, especially Jack, who watched him with a calm, unwavering gaze. The judge didn't mince words during sentencing. "Mr. Ryan, your pattern of behavior demonstrates a complete disregard for the law and for the well-being of those you've harmed. You have manipulated, intimidated, and deceived countless individuals, leaving emotional and financial devastation in your wake. Today, you will be held accountable." As the judge read the sentence, 15 years in prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 10, there was an audible sigh of relief from the victims in the courtroom. Ryan's shoulders sagged, and for the first time, he looked genuinely defeated. When the bailiff approached to escort him away, Ryan's gaze flickered toward Jack, but he quickly looked away, unable to meet the man's eyes. Jack felt no need to gloat or celebrate. Watching Ryan being led away in handcuffs was enough. It was a visual confirmation that justice had been served, and the chapter involving Ryan was finally closed. As he left the courthouse, Jack took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. While Ryan faced justice in the courtroom, Sophia was left to confront her own reckoning. One that played out not in legal proceedings, but in the quiet, relentless judgment of those around her and the battles she fought within herself. Sophia's life after the divorce was a far cry from the comfort and stability she had once enjoyed. The house she had called home now belonged to Jack, and her financial situation was precarious. With minimal support due to the infidelity clause in their divorce settlement, Sophia was forced to downsize significantly. She moved into a modest one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, a stark contrast to the spacious home she had once shared with Jack. Her social life had disintegrated in the wake of the affair. Friends who had once admired her charisma and charm now saw her differently, some with pity, others with outright disdain. The whispers followed her wherever she went, and even casual acquaintances distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with someone whose scandal was still fresh in the community's memory. At work, Sophia struggled to maintain her professionalism. The rumors had reached her colleagues, and while no one openly confronted her, the tension was palpable. She felt the weight of their judgment in every sideways glance, every whispered conversation that stopped when she walked into the room. It became harder and harder to focus, and eventually, her performance began to slip. Feeling isolated and overwhelmed, Sophia made the difficult decision to seek therapy. At first, she approached it with hesitation, unsure if it would help or if she even deserved to feel better. But her therapist, a compassionate and firm woman named Dr. Turner, provided a space for Sophia to confront her actions without judgment. "I don't know how I ended up here," Sophia confessed during one of her early sessions. "I had a good life, a good husband, and I ruined it." Dr. Turner leaned forward, her tone gentle but probing. "Sophia, Understanding how you got here is the first step to moving forward. What were you looking for in that affair? What was missing in your life that made you believe this was the answer? The questions forced Sophia to reflect deeply on her choices. Over time, she began to unravel the insecurities and dissatisfaction that had driven her actions. She admitted to feeling overlooked in her marriage, not because Jack had neglected her intentionally, but because she had failed to communicate her needs. Instead of addressing those feelings, she had sought validation in the wrong place, mistaking Ryan's attention for love and excitement. As Sophia delved deeper into therapy, she started to see patterns in her behavior, ways she had avoided accountability, manipulated situations, and blamed others for her unhappiness. It was a painful process, but it was also necessary. For the first time, she began to understand the damage she had caused, not just to Jack but to herself. Sophia's journey toward redemption was far from linear. There were days when she felt hopeful, believing she could rebuild her life and learn from her mistakes. But there were also days when the weight of her choices felt unbearable, when she questioned whether she even deserved a second chance. The loneliness was the hardest part. Without the support of Jack, her friends, or even her family, Sophia often felt like she was navigating her struggles in isolation. Ella, while sympathetic to her sister's pain, had drawn a clear boundary. "I love you, Sophia, but I can't support what you did. You need to take responsibility for your actions and show that you're willing to change." Sophia tried to mend her relationships, reaching out to old friends and attempting to make amends. Some were receptive, acknowledging her efforts to change, but many were not. The road to forgiveness, she realized, was a long and uncertain one. Despite the challenges, Sophia found small victories along the way. She took on extra shifts at work to stabilize her finances, slowly earning back the respect of her colleagues. She volunteered at a local shelter, hoping to give back in some way and find meaning outside of her own struggles. These small acts of service became a source of comfort, a reminder that she still had the capacity to do good. Her therapy sessions continued to be a lifeline, helping her build healthier coping mechanisms and a stronger sense of self-awareness. Dr. Turner encouraged her to write letters, not to send, but to express her feelings and confront the people she had hurt. One of those letters was to Jack, a raw and heartfelt apology that acknowledged the pain she had caused. "I don't expect your forgiveness," she wrote, "but I need you to know that I understand now what I did and why it was wrong. You didn't deserve any of it. I hope one day you can find peace, even if it's not with me." While Sophia's journey was far from over, she began to see glimpses of a new path, a life where she could take responsibility for her actions and strive to be better. She understood that redemption wasn't about erasing the past but about learning from it and using those lessons to build a more honest and authentic future. Jack, from a distance, heard about Sophia's efforts to change. While he no longer held anger toward her, he remained firm in his decision to move on. Her redemption was her own journey, and Jack had already begun his own. For both of them, the chapter of their shared life was closed, but the lessons it taught would shape the lives they were building apart. Sitting on the porch of his new home, Jack watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and orange. The world seemed calm, a stark contrast to the storm that had once engulfed his life. For the first time in years, Jack felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet assurance that he had weathered the worst and emerged stronger. He often found himself reflecting on the journey, the betrayal, the anger, the heartbreak, and ultimately, the resilience that carried him through it all. What struck him most was how much he had changed. The man who once felt blindsided and powerless had transformed into someone who could face adversity with strength and determination. Jack had no illusions about the pain he had endured. There were nights when the memories crept in, moments when he doubted his decisions, and times when he wondered if he could have done more to save his marriage. But those thoughts no longer consumed him. Instead, they served as reminders of how far he had come. He had handled the situation with dignity, never letting the chaos drag him into bitterness or vengeance. He took pride in the choices he had made, not because they were easy, but because they were necessary. Walking away from a toxic marriage, standing up to Ryan, and reclaiming his life had required courage he didn't know he possessed. And now, as he looked at the life he had rebuilt, He knew every painful step had been worth it. A significant part of Jack's healing came from his relationship with Grace. Their connection had started as a tentative friendship, but over time, it blossomed into something much deeper. Grace's warmth and honesty were like a balm for Jack's wounded heart, and her unwavering support gave him the strength to trust again. Grace had her own story of resilience, having endured a difficult divorce years earlier. Her empathy and understanding made her a safe space for Jack, someone he could open up to without fear of judgment. Their relationship was built on mutual respect, shared values, and a commitment to honesty, qualities that Jack now cherished more than ever. They spent their days exploring the simple joys of life, cooking meals together, hiking trails in the nearby woods, and talking late into the night about their dreams and plans for the future. Grace's laughter filled the house, a stark contrast to the silence that had once haunted it. With her, Jack felt seen, valued, and truly at peace. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Grace took Jack's hand and said, "You've been through so much, but you never let it break you. That's strength. It's one of the things I admire most about you." Jack smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "I couldn't have done it without you. You remind me every day that it's possible to find light after darkness." Their relationship wasn't perfect. No relationship ever is. But it was honest and rooted in mutual growth. For Jack, it wasn't about erasing the past, but about building a future that honored the lessons he had learned. With Grace, he found happiness not in forgetting, but in moving forward with hope and love. As Jack settled into his new life, he felt compelled to share his story with others. He knew he wasn't the only one who had faced betrayal, and he wanted to turn his pain into something meaningful. With Grace's encouragement, he began speaking at local support groups and writing about his journey. His story resonated with others, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was real. People saw themselves in Jack's struggles, the initial shock, the overwhelming pain, the slow process of healing, and found hope in his resilience. Jack spoke about the importance of setting boundaries, prioritizing self-care, and leaning on trusted friends during times of crisis. He emphasized that betrayal didn't define a person's worth, and that moving forward was always possible, even after the darkest days. One of his most impactful moments came during a support group meeting, where a man named Tom shared his own experience of infidelity. "Hearing you talk about your journey," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion, "it's given me hope. I've been stuck in this cycle of anger and self-blame, but seeing how you've rebuilt your life, it makes me believe I can, too." Jack placed a reassuring hand on Tom's shoulder. "You can," he said firmly. "It won't be easy, but every step you take toward healing is a step worth taking. And you don't have to do it alone." Jack's words weren't just for others. They were a reminder to himself of how far he had come. Sharing his story became a source of healing in its own right, transforming his pain into purpose. The final chapter of Jack's journey was marked by a profound sense of freedom. He no longer felt weighed down by the betrayal or the anger that had once consumed him. Instead, he carried those experiences as lessons, reminders of his strength and resilience. One sunny afternoon, Jack stood in his backyard, watching as Grace tended to her garden. The laughter of their friends echoed from the patio, where Max was grilling burgers and Ella was sharing a story that had everyone in stitches. The scene was simple, yet it represented everything Jack had fought to rebuild: love, friendship, and a life filled with genuine connections. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Jack found himself reflecting once again. The road to this moment had been long and arduous, but it had also been transformative. He had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and challenges that once seemed insurmountable. Yet, here he stood, strong, whole, and at peace. Later that evening, as the guests left and the house grew quiet, Jack stepped out onto the porch. The night was cool, the stars scattered like diamonds across the sky. He took a deep breath, letting the stillness wash over him. In that moment, Jack realized that his journey wasn't just about overcoming betrayal. It was about rediscovering himself. He had learned to trust again, to love again, and to embrace the beauty of life, even when it didn't go as planned. As he stood there, looking out at the world with a quiet confidence, Jack felt a sense of gratitude. The past had shaped him, but it no longer defined him. He was free, free to live, free to love, and free to build a future that was truly his own. And in that freedom, Jack found his peace.